had a wonderful week. Welcome to K24 this week. Here on K24, we have the latest analysis of stories that have been making headlines across the week. My name is Brian Amuai. Now catch us across our social media platforms at Amoy Brian at K24 TV across social media platforms. Now let's begin. We begin from matters COG and the Senate. Now this week, at the Parliament buildings, we witnessed a scuffle between senators and the governor of Samburu, that is Lati Lelelit, with the wrangles between the COG and the Senate continuing, with the governors accusing senators of using intimidation tactics to force them to appear before the committees. What began as a routine accountability session has now spiraled into one of the most dramatic showdowns between Kenya's two most powerful devolved institutions, the Senate and the governors. This week, the country watched as tension exploded at Parliament buildings, a governor fleeing, senator baying for arrest, and security forced to step in. But beneath the chaos lies a deeper, more uncomfortable question. Is this about accountability or power?
Senator. He has a right to come to Parliament. He's a former member of Parliament.
Senator,
is Parliament restricted from other people? Even Gen Zs went into this Parliament. It's not a private house, it's a public office.
At the heart of this fight is the role of the Senate, constitutionally mandated to protect counties and oversee how billions in public funds are spent. But governors argue something else, that senators have overstepped, turning oversight into political theatre.
So rather than embarrass themselves even more, because this more than the physical harm that's brought to the governor, which is pretty grave really, it has also embarrassed the august house of the Senate.
Yet senators insist they are only doing their job.
These are the crooks Kenyans are crying about.
The latest flashpoint, a dramatic standoff involving Samburu Governor Lati Lelelit, summoned to appear before the Senate. He didn't just skip, he showed up, tension escalated, and then he fled. Reports indicate senators even pushed for his arrest, escalating what should have been a procedural session into a near physical confrontation.
So there must be some mischief that is running around for some of us to be seen to be bad and not attending committees. I would have taken two ways. One, not to attend both committees because I was given the same hour, the same time for both. Or choose to attend one. And I think I took the better option because I attended one. I could have avoided both because there is a conflict on which committee to attend.
But far from the Senate chambers in Samburu, Wajir and Kisumu, there are ordinary Kenyans watching this unfold and wondering what happens to the services, what happens to the money, what happens to devolution. Because every missed appearance, every suspended session, and every political standoff delays decisions that directly affect millions.
Kuongeza chumbi juu ya chumbi ngine. Yeye ndio ni mwanaume na anatakana kuambia watu si kupigana. Na huyo ndugu yetu, nasema hii ndugu yetu senator ya Samburu, na anakapenda asikie kwa sababu ni yangu yangu. Hana heshima kabisa.
Watai Senate ifanye kazi yake kwa njia ambayo inafaa, kwa sababu Senate na hata huyu Amason Kingi ana ruhusa kabisa ya kupeana amri governor ashikwe ni kama ni polisi. Tuko na IG wa Kenya ambaye tunampenda, anafuata sheria. Tuko na rais wa Kenya ambaye tunampenda na tunampea 2 terms Ruto. Kwanza
For years, senators and governors have clashed over control, visibility and influence. From the controversial list of shame to budget battles to summons that governors sometimes ignore, the Senate has increasingly tightened its grip, even involving law enforcement to compel attendance. And here lies the shift. This is no longer a polite oversight relationship. It is a power contest over who truly controls devolution. So what are we really witnessing? Is the Senate finally asserting itself as the guardian of the public funds? Or are the governors resisting what they see as political intimidation?
But my reason ya kuomba rescheduling was denied immediately, almost instantly. When my letter was received, they wrote immediately that you must come. And that was the first summon, the first invite. It's not even a summon. So I came, so singeweza kuja because nilikuwa na maneno mengine. Hiyo ni tarehe 9 Disemba. Lakini kwa hiyo mkutano ya kwanza ambaye niliomba msamaha kuwa sitaweza kufika, ambaye nilikatazwa immediately, ambaye ni mkutano ya kwanza, hakuna wengine umekataa maisha.
The fight is not about senators. It is not about governors. It is about the promises of devolution, a promise that power would move closer to the people, that resources would change lives, that leadership would be accountable. But as tempers flare in Nairobi, the real question remains: who is fighting for the people and who is just fighting? On the political front, opposition politicians seem to be united, with a strong statement having been witnessed this week, with former Deputy President Gachagua and the fourth President of the Republic of Kenya, that is Uhuru Kenyatta, meeting in Kirinyaga and sharing a handshake. How does this shape the opposition politics and politics in general, and also their message for the Mount Kenya people? Take a look. In Kenyan politics, symbolism is everything, and this week, a funeral became the stage for what could be a political reset. Images of Uhuru Kenyatta engaging opposition leaders, some of whom have been at odds, are now fueling speculation of a grand coalition in the making. For months, the opposition has struggled with fragmentation, mixed messaging, and dwindling street momentum, but this meeting signals something deeper, a possible realignment of power blocks.
Ninaona hii watu ya Kasongo pale Ikulu wana shida hapo mikutano, wakisema ati Uhuru Kenyatta rais wetu hawezi fanya kazi na Rigiji. Mlijua namna gani? How do you know? Let me tell you Kasongo, wewe hujui sisi. The fact tulikupatia kura unafikiria wewe unatujua. In fact you think you are one of us. You are not. You don't know us. You don't know us.
Since the 2022 election loss, Uhuru Kenyatta has been on and off on the political scene, leaving the opposition without a unified structure strong enough to challenge President William Ruto. Now, the re-emergence of Uhuru Kenyatta, a former head of state with influence in Mount Kenya, could significantly reshape the arithmetic. Because in Kenyan elections, coalitions win power, not individuals.
Be leaders. That is what the people of Kenya want. They want leadership. They don't want politics. They don't want insults. They want direction. Yeah? They want direction. They want leadership that will see them through to the other side.
Even out of office, Uhuru Kenyatta remains a critical political broker. His perceived fallout with President William Ruto and his silence since leaving office have left a vacuum, especially in the vote-rich Mount Kenya region. And if he actively aligns with the opposition, it could reopen Mount Kenya as a battleground, strengthen opposition numbers nationally, and most importantly, legitimize a new coalition narrative.
Si walikula hiyo pesa. So the President Uhuru Kenyatta did a great job in bridging the differences that were there between us and the Luo community. And it is upon us there, because Uhuru is retired, to take it further. James Orengo, tunataka tukae na nyinyi. We are one people. Na sisi hatuna ugomvi na mtu yeyote.
But unity in Kenyan opposition politics has always been fragile. Past coalitions have collapsed under leadership rivalries, ethnic balancing politics, and disagreements over power-sharing formulas. The big question now: can Gachagua and other opposition leaders coexist with new entrants without repeating history? With the 2027 in sight, this moment could mark the early stages of coalition building. Political analysts say these things will define the opposition paths: a clear leader or a flag bearer, a united national message beyond protests, and the ability to consolidate regional voting blocks. Without that, even symbolic unity risks fading into political theater.
Lakini rais wetu, najua saa ingine mimi najilaumu ya kwamba nilidanganywa na nikapoteza watu wetu, na ninajilaumu, lakini najipatia nguvu. Ninasema kama mabishop walidanganywa, mapasta, mareverend, hii Rigiji mtu ya Monyoro ni nani?
So was this just a moment of mourning, or the birth of new political force? In Kenya's politics, alliances are never accidental and rarely permanent. But one thing is clear: the road to 2027 may have just found its sign of opposition convergence. Now, we will continue to defend ourselves. That was the message Iran's ambassador to Kenya had for the Israeli and the United States as the war escalates, with President Donald Trump indicating that the war will continue for the next 2 to 3 weeks. The Middle East is once again on the edge. Tension between Iran and Israel are no longer confined to shadows wars. They are increasingly direct, dangerous, and global in implications. But beyond the missiles and military rhetoric, what is really driving this conflict, and how far could it go? For decades, Iran and Israel have fought a proxy war through militias, cyber operations, and regional influence. But today, that conflict is shifting. Direct strikes, retaliatory threats, and the rising regional alliances are signaling a dangerous transition from covert confrontations to open hostility. At the center of it all, Iran's expanding regional footprint and Israel's determination to stop it at all costs.
There should be concrete international firm guarantees in preventing any recurrence of such attacks in the future. So there should be put in place a mechanism for compensation. Of course, you know, the damages that has been occurred as a result of these aggressions and bombardments are very huge. So it should be foreseen such a mechanism for compensation, and also those who have committed this aggression should be held accountable.
If you had to put a figure to the, a compensation and, repatriation so far, those, especially from the aggressors that you call, what would that figure be?
The figure comes after the end because it should be evaluated, and then there is a need for a mechanism agreed upon but guaranteed by international community, but not only the UN system, because they failed in exercising and exhausting their duties, in particular the UN Security Council. But the point is that the international community as a whole should come in, step in, and provide all the firm and concrete guarantees for compensation that be workable, and then to guarantee that such a similar aggression will not happen again. So these are the main prerequisites. Of course, until that time that the attacks are continued, the military attacks and invasion and aggression, we will deserve our right, inherent and inalienable right to self-defense in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations, and in particular Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations in self-defense. But of course it should be proportionate. Our response, military response, would be proportionate and discriminatory. So we will observe all the humanitarian principles and rules, the law that govern the wartime situations, humanitarian law. So we are observing there. We will respond very discriminatorily, but proportionately, but decisively and very strong to defend ourselves, because we have to defend ourselves. There is no other way. And because we are under the aggression against all international rules and norms, and all the humanitarian principles and the ethical principles and morals. So that's the situation. We will continue our self-defense operation, self-defense activities and measures, but for any sort of resolution for this conflict, these bombardments, these attacks first should be stopped, and then the war in the region in its totality should be stopped and resolved forever.
He insisted that Iran's posture is driven by the need to protect its sovereignty and to respond to what he termed as continued provocations. The ambassador also accused Israel of being primary destabilizing force in the region, pointing to military actions beyond its borders. But perhaps most telling, he maintained that Iran is not seeking war.
But, as it has been confirmed and declared by our authorities, we will not opt for the choice or the option for only a temporary ceasefire. And the reason is that if we go again and fall in such a similar trap for the third time, and I will explain on,
you say the third
what
time.
is the trap of ceasefire, negotiation, buying the time to be prepared for again to commit the aggression and attack. So this time our people, military forces and the government all together are very decisive and determined to continue their self-defense and responding to the attacks and military attacks and aggression until that time that all the conditions are provided for a long-last kind of ending the war, not only in Iran, but throughout the region, in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Iran, in Yemen, and all of those countries. So this is not only a war against our people, this is an aggression imposed against the whole people of the region, the whole the countries, in particular the Muslim.
Now, the deadline for the submission of supporting documents for victims of human rights violations was slated for 3rd of April, that is today, Friday. The Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights has, however, indicated that it has faced challenges when it comes to moving to every part of the country to collect data. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is racing against time. Following a presidential directive, the Commission has just 60 days to develop a national framework and oversee compensation for victims of human rights violations. That process includes victims from multiple protest cycles, 2017, 2024 and 2025, many of whom suffered injuries, loss and trauma. However, KNCHR maintains it is not limited to timeline. April 3rd. What is that deadline?
That deadline for April 3rd is for purposes of receiving the first phase of data. But I also want to clarify that as a national human rights institution, the KNCHR enjoys a constitutional mandate. Part of that constitutional mandate is to receive complaints, investigate, and make recommendations for appropriate redress. So the fact that there's a timeline for 3rd does not mean that after 3rd there will be no receiving of complaints. The constitutional and statutory mandate continues to exist, and the KNCHR will all the same continue receiving complaints. This is for purposes of looking at the first phase and also allowing verification, because it's not enough to just receive the reports or the information or the claims. There will be another process to just authenticate or verify the claims as will be received or as will have been received by that date.
But the urgency is striking. Victims have been given just 21 days to submit evidence, including medical reports, police records and postmortems by April 3rd. And already the concern is clear. Is this a timeline realistic or exclusionary?
To date, sijamuona, mimi sijazika. Na mpaka wa leo sijui yako wapi. Then after that, wakati walisema tulete makaratasi, nimeleta. Sina anything else apart from pisha yake na ubi. Sasa mtu kama mimi niko wapi?
Hatutaki process ambayo inafanywa kwa haraka, ambayo itakuwa na makosa hapa na pale kwa sababu imeharakishwa. So tuhakikishe tumefanya kazi hii kwa ustadi, tumeifanya kazi hii kwa kuangalia masala ya waathiriwa, ndio tuhakikishe kila mtu amepata haki yake.
But the fact of the matter is that from the Gazette notice, the proclamation that we received, and from the court process, the entire process should be as open, as inclusive, as participatory as possible, without in any way discriminating against certain categories of victims. A victim is a victim, irrespective of the circumstances under which they became victims or the timelines within which that happened.
Human rights groups say this is only a fraction of the full picture, arguing that years of protests have left a long trail of unresolved violations. Now, the state is attempting to quantify that pain and assign it a financial value. In an interview with K24, the Deputy Director of Legal at the Commission acknowledged that the process is facing serious operational constraints. He pointed to limited funding as a key challenge, affecting outreach, verification and the ability to reach victims across the country.
Can report to the Commission physically And even with technology, there will still be some limitations. So there's a need for the Commission to be out there, hearing from members of the public, to be as accessible, as close as possible to them, so that it also gets a chance to confirm the reports that are being made. And that is a resource-intensive exercise. It needs people being out there, people interacting with the public, and also being as close to the grassroots as possible.
So there are warnings this may not be enough, given the scale and severity of violations. And beyond the amount, there is the issue of trust. Human rights advocates argue that compensation must be transparent, inclusive, and free from political influence. Anything less risks deepening public skepticism.
The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights can and must do better, particularly in ensuring transparency, accountability, and a genuine victim-centered approach.
The Commission must prioritize claims arising from the most recent incidents, particularly those linked to the Gen Z protests in 2024 and 2025, and thereafter work backwards. The recency of these violations means that victims and families are still in acute distress and require urgent intervention and redress.
But perhaps the biggest concern is philosophical. Can compensation replace accountability? For years, rights groups have documented extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances, with little prosecution of those responsible. And now, critics warn without justice, compensation risks becoming a price tag on human rights violations.
But for now, we are going to compensate those who lost their lives. Compensation of life is not something which you can do. You cannot replace a life. You cannot compensate it. There's no cost to it. It is just to give some, to give some pole to the people who lost their loved ones. And it's pole for those who were injured in those demonstrations. It is not to compensate. It is, even though we call it compensation, but you cannot compensate life.
To the big numbers of the week, what is happening in the Russian front? How many are stuck? This week, Mudavadi revealed the numbers.
Let me respond. First, the first aspect of it is to respond to the issue of the Kenyans currently missing, stranded, or otherwise unaccounted for in Russia, and the current status of investigations into the reported deceptive recruitment of Kenyan citizens. So far, until yesterday, we had 10 Kenyans who have been reported missing in action. Yesterday, this number increased. Now we have a figure of 60 Kenyans. And when we say missing in action, we cannot pronounce outrightly whether they are dead or whether they are captured or whatever, but the figure we got is that they are 16. 38 are currently in various Russian hospitals under restricted access, leaving an estimated 165 Kenyans who are deployed in the special military operations. To date, Madam Chair, 47 Kenyans have been rescued with the assistance of the Kenyan Embassy in Moscow, facilitating their repatriation back home. On record, we have 2 Kenyans, namely Evans Kibet and Macharia Willie Muniu, who are held in Ukraine as prisoners of war. From the records, the summary is that 252 Kenyans may have been enlisted into the Russian special military operations. This number could be maybe slightly higher or slightly less, but that is where we have gotten indication either through family members or through other sources.
Now, to a feel-good story of the week, we focus on matters education, how vulnerable students are supported through education, and some of the organizations that are coming forth to make sure that each and every child gets access to matters education. It is in Riruta, where as the city slowly comes alive, a group of young children walk into school carrying more than just books. For many of them, this is a second chance. Behind that opportunity is Archbishop Andreas Macarius, a man on a mission to make sure no child is left behind simply because of where they come from. Through a quiet but powerful education support program, he is sponsoring vulnerable children, guiding them from primary school to high school and even into universities.
Teachers, the heroes, are fighting for you all, the children who are receiving education in this school where we are.
But it doesn't stop at school fees. Here at Orthodox Center in Riruta, education is being built from the ground up. Institutions like the St. Clement Orthodox Primary School, PC Kinyanjui Training Institute, and Orthodox College of Africa are shaping not just students, but the futures.
But remember that this is your home. You'll come back very soon, because this is the place where you are receiving all the appropriate tools which will assist you in your life in the future.
For a child who once faced the reality of dropping out, this classroom becomes more than just a place of learning. It becomes hope, a path, and a future. And this impact is no longer confined to Riruta. From Vihiga to Nandi, Kisumu, and Kiambu, the same model is opening doors, reaching deeper into communities where opportunity is often limited.
It would be a great achievement for us to assist more and more our society where we are in education.
Go in line with the big four agendas of the country, whereby we want to have self-sustainability in all our young people, where they can employ themselves.
We should also look at making sure that they get job placement so that they can be able to utilize the education that they've gotten, and we will work.
In a world often focused on big promises, this is a reminder that real change can be simple. One child, one chance, one future at a time. All right, that does it for us here on K24 this week. Thank you so much for being part of this particular production. Let's do this again when God says we do.